Now, Iran is at the top of the agenda at the UN Security Council meeting underway in New York right now. Strong statements have been made by the US, accusing Iran of supplying weapons to Syria. But Russia has criticized the US sanctions, calling them unilateral. For more on this, let's now talk to American lawyer and professor of international law at the Geneva School of Diplomacy, Dr. Alfred de Zayas, live in Geneva. Thank you for coming on RT today. Iran's economy and financial sector already under heavy sanctions from the US and the EU, who all the while claim Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons. What is the agenda here, do you think?
Well, I am not an economist. I'm a professor of law, and I'm also a former United Nations senior official. And I very much believe in the United Nations Charter and very much believe in the purposes and the principles of the organization, the most important one being peacekeeping and peacemaking. And I have a great concern about the organization being transformed into a war-making organization and misusing the Security Council for purposes of incitement.
Well, I'm sorry, can you give us some examples of these purposes of incitement? Can you give us some examples, please?
If you follow the media in Europe, in the United States, you see that we're gearing up for an attack, and we're trying to make an attack on Iran somehow plausible, somehow justifiable. Now, we know already from the experience in 2003, exactly 9 years ago, the war against Iraq commenced. We know that there was a gearing up to that war linked with the so-called weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. The United Nations was engaged in inspections. The inspectors were persuaded that Saddam Hussein at the time was cooperating, and there was no justification whatever for
we understand going back. Well, if we go back to the whole Iraq war, we understand about Hans Blix and the whole alleged mobile weapons lab. But I think you're trying to draw a parallel between Iraq and Iran. But the point I must raise to you is this: is that in recent days, Israeli intelligence, Mossad, and the CIA both agreed that Iran is not trying to develop a nuclear weapon. What argument can America or NATO or the UN continue to use to further pressure and isolate Iran?
It is not for me to define the agenda of my country. I am very much an American, and I very much believe in the good things of my country. And I am just concerned about certain circles that actually want war. The military-industrial complex always makes money with war, and that is part of the agenda. I mean, you have to use the weapons if you want to continue selling them. And as far as a war against Iraq or war against Iran is concerned, the area is already highly destabilized, and it would be a monstrous catastrophe if we were going to do that. But that is prohibited in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. And Article 2, Paragraph 3 obliges us to negotiate, and to negotiate in good faith. So that is what the organization is there for.
Are you saying when you talk about arguing and creating diplomacy in good faith, it seems to me that you're saying that when it comes to the UN, with its history with Iraq, Afghanistan, with NATO as well, with Libya, now looking at Syria, also looking at Iran, is there some sort of geopolitical, if not regional or global strategy being undertaken by the United Nations in New York?
I wouldn't say by the United Nations, certainly by certain members of the United Nations. They have their agendas, but the United Nations has 193 states, and the organization is not being directed by anyone in particular. But what the organization has to do is to vindicate the rule of law and to vindicate the validity of the Charter and to make it clear that international law cannot be à la carte. You cannot say, we will apply international law in this case, we will not apply it in that case. Take the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Article 4 guarantees the right of every state to have access to nuclear energy. And Article 3 requires a certain level of inspections. Iran agrees with a certain level of inspections. You have to see where the threshold lies.
Well, certainly, Dr. Alfred de Zayas, I do apologise. This is certainly an issue that requires a lot more time than we have available for both of us here on RT today. Professor of International Law at the Geneva School of Diplomacy, live in Geneva. Thank you so much for coming on RT today.
Pleasure.